He was known for his sharp words, his relentless questions, and his refusal to back down. For years, he debated Muslims with full conviction. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a mission. Every time he met someone who believed in Islam, he challenged them, not out of hatred, but out of a deep curiosity wrapped in skepticism. He studied, argued, and picked apart every answer. To him, Islam was a mystery he was determined to unravel. But always from the outside, he saw it as flawed, as just another belief system. And yet something kept pulling him back into conversation after conversation. With every debate, he became more knowledgeable, yet also more restless. His questions got deeper, and the answers started to stir something within him. He wasn't just debating anymore, he was searching. But the pride of being right, of winning arguments, often got in the way of hearing what truly mattered. Until one day, something unexpected happened. During a quiet moment, away from the noise of debates and defenses, he stumbled upon a verse. A simple line he had read before but never really heard. This time, he wasn't trying to win. He wasn't in front of an audience. He was just a man alone with his thoughts, confronted by words that pierced through the walls he had built for years. Those words didn't argue with him. They didn't demand anything. They simply spoke to the core of his being, to a place that no debate had ever reached. It wasn't a dramatic scene, no thunder, no flashing lights, just a silent shift, like a door slowly creaking open after being locked for years. Suddenly, everything he had debated started to look different. Not because he was defeated intellectually, but because he was awakened emotionally and spiritually. What had once been just ideas and doctrines now became something alive, something that spoke to the soul. He began to reflect not just on the verse, but on all the people he had debated over the years. He remembered their calmness, their patience, their sincerity. He remembered how they never wavered, no matter how hard he pushed. He realized now that they weren't trying to win him over. They were simply sharing what gave them peace. And for the first time, he wanted that peace too. This wasn't the end of his journey. It was the beginning. The beginning of a path he once swore he'd never walk. The beginning of humility, of seeking not to challenge truth, but to embrace it. What started as a mission to disprove Islam turned into a journey of the heart, a journey that led him to the very faith he once rejected. His story is a reminder that sometimes the people who argue the most are the ones who are closest to a breakthrough. That even the hardest hearts can soften when truth is presented not as a fight, but as a light. And that one verse, one moment of sincerity can change everything. So if you've ever doubted, or if you know someone who's been resisting, let this story be a reminder. Truth has a way of finding you. Sometimes it comes quietly, sometimes through a single verse, but when it does, it can change your entire life. Welcome to the story of a man who debated Islam for years, until one verse changed his heart forever. He was never the type to sit quietly in front of a religious discussion. Whenever he heard someone talking about Islam, he couldn't resist stepping in. It wasn't just curiosity that pushed him. It was the need to prove it wrong. In his mind, Islam was a man-made religion, filled with contradictions and confusion. He had grown up in a different faith, one that shaped his views about the world. And he believed Islam stood against everything he valued. So he debated, not once, not twice, but for years. Online, in person, through books and forums, wherever he found Muslims, he challenged them. Many Muslims tried to explain their faith with kindness, offering him logic, stories, and perspectives he hadn't considered before. But each time he responded with sharper arguments, tougher questions, and a heart closed off from understanding. He wasn't ready to hear. For him, winning the argument was more important than understanding the truth. But deep inside, even he didn't realize something was shifting. Each conversation left a small mark. He remembered the sincerity in people's eyes. He noticed the calmness in their voices, even when he was aggressive. Something about their peace frustrated him. How could they be so sure, so grounded, so unshaken? One night, after yet another intense debate, he sat alone in his room, scrolling through his notes and saved links. A phrase kept repeating in his mind, something one of the Muslims had said during the discussion. It didn't feel like an argument. It felt like an invitation. He searched it again, read it slowly this time. No debate, no defense, just reflection. That night, something cracked. Not his beliefs just yet, but his confidence in denying what he didn't truly understand. He realized he had spent years trying to break something without ever really listening to it. And that one verse, just one, would soon become the beginning of a completely new chapter. This was the moment the walls began to fall, not through pressure, but through quiet realization. He had tried to debate his way to the truth, but now the truth was gently knocking on his heart. And for the first time, he was thinking about letting it in. As the days passed, he found himself unable to ignore the feeling that something had shifted. He had spent years reading about Islam to disprove it, analyzing scriptures, dissecting historical claims, and picking apart arguments from Muslims. But now, for the first time, he wasn't reading to attack. He was reading to understand. That one verse he had stumbled upon kept ringing in his heart like an echo he couldn't silence. It had bypassed all the intellectual defenses he had built over the years and touched something much deeper. He didn't tell anyone at first. There was a kind of internal conflict happening within him. His mind was trying to hold on to the old narrative, one that made him feel in control, in charge, always right. But his heart was slowly moving in a different direction. He began rewatching debates he had once proudly shared online. This time, he noticed things he had never paid attention to before. Not just the arguments, but the emotion, the sincerity, the dignity in how Muslims responded, even under pressure. He also started thinking about the Muslims he had encountered in real life. Their lives weren't perfect, but there was a sense of clarity and peace in them. He had always dismissed it as blind faith, but now he wondered, what if it wasn't blindness at all? What if it was the result of truly knowing something worth submitting to? Every day, that one verse pulled him closer. It wasn't complex. It didn't have poetic flourishes. It was simple, direct, and yet deeply personal. It made him feel seen, not judged, but understood. He had spent so many years arguing that he had forgotten how to just listen. And now the verse spoke to him in silence, louder than any debate ever had. For the first time, he didn't want to fight anymore. He just wanted to feel the peace that others had felt. He wanted to find out if what they said about Islam being the truth was real, not for them, but for him. And that quiet desire to know, to connect, to surrender, that was the spark that would eventually become a flame. He couldn't sleep the night it finally hit him. That one verse, those few words, kept playing over and over in his mind like a song stuck on repeat. But it wasn't annoying, it was awakening. He didn't fully understand how or why, but something deep inside him was responding to it in a way no logic ever had. He had spent years mastering arguments, memorizing counterpoints, and preparing for debates. Yet none of those skills could explain the calm that was now washing over him, just from reflecting on a verse he once would have mocked. He opened up a notebook he used for debate prep, pages filled with objections and criticisms. He stared at them, and for the first time they felt empty. His mind, once full of fire and challenges, was now unusually quiet. He realized he had asked all the hard questions, but maybe he had never asked the right ones. Questions like, what if I've been wrong? What if I've missed something deeper? What if this truth I've fought for so long is actually the one I've been unknowingly searching for? With trembling hands, he began writing, not arguments this time, but reflections. He wrote about the kindness he had seen in Muslims, the patience they showed him, and the strange but powerful feeling that Islam wasn't trying to control people, it was trying to free them. Free them from ego, fear, loneliness, confusion. And now, it was freeing him. He remembered one Muslim brother who never raised his voice, no matter how harsh the debate became. He always smiled, always ended with, "I pray you find peace." Back then he thought it was just a polite phrase. Now, it felt like a message sent straight to his heart. He wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. This wasn't about making a public announcement. This was personal, raw, real. He didn't know everything, but he knew one thing for sure. He could no longer deny the pull he felt toward Islam. He had tried for years to resist it with facts and logic, but now his heart was leading the way. And sometimes when the heart speaks, all the noise in the world falls silent. He began walking a path he never imagined for himself. Quietly, carefully, without telling anyone, he started learning more about Islam, not to debate, not to argue, but to feel. And the more he explored, the more familiar it felt. It was as if the pieces of a massive puzzle were finally falling into place. Everything he had once challenged began to make sense in a way he couldn't explain with just intellect. He read about the concept of one God, about accountability, mercy, and submission, not out of fear, but out of love and trust. He found comfort in the way Islam didn't demand perfection, but sincerity. The message wasn't about being flawless. It was about trying, repenting, growing. That was something he could connect to. After years of pride, stubbornness, and debates, he was starting to embrace humility, because he realized the truth didn't need defending, it only needed discovering. One night, he found himself sitting in the back of a mosque. He didn't plan to go in, but something drew him there. He watched a prayer from a distance. There was no music, no dramatic rituals, just people bowing together in silence, connecting to their Creator. It was the first time he had ever seen peace in motion, and it shook him. As he sat there, something inside him whispered, "This is what you've been missing. This is what you were fighting against. Not because it was wrong, but because you were scared of how right it felt." His chest tightened, but not out of fear, out of awe. A kind of peaceful surrender was slowly taking over. That night, he didn't need a long debate or a clever response. He just needed the courage to admit what he already knew deep inside. This was the truth. The same truth he spent years resisting had quietly become the only thing that gave him peace. The journey wasn't over, but something had changed forever. He wasn't searching anymore. He was arriving. And he knew whatever came next, he wouldn't walk it alone. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at a face he had known all his life. But now something was different. The same eyes that once carried fire and pride were now filled with calm. The weight of years of debate, argument, and resistance had slowly lifted from his shoulders. He didn't feel defeated. He felt free. The truth he had denied for so long had finally reached him. Not through force or fear, but through one verse that touched his heart in a way no book or debate ever could. That morning, he walked back to the same mosque he had visited silently just weeks before. This time, he wasn't just a curious observer. He was ready. His heart had already submitted long before his words would. As he sat with the imam, he shared his story. not with pride, but with humility. He spoke of the years he spent challenging Islam, the long nights of inner conflict, and the single moment that changed everything. The Imam didn't judge him. Instead, he smiled warmly, as if to say, "You were always on the path. You just didn't know it." The moment came. With sincerity and trembling hands, he uttered the words that would mark the beginning of his new life. The testimony of faith. Simple, powerful, pure. It wasn't just a declaration. It was a release, a rebirth. The tears that rolled down his cheeks weren't from regret. They were from relief. After so many years of searching, he had finally come home. His friends were stunned. Some couldn't believe it. Others tried to argue with him the same way he once argued with Muslims. But he didn't fight back. He didn't need to. His heart was at peace. He had found what he was looking for all along. Purpose, clarity, connection with the one who created him. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be questions, struggles, and tests. But now he had faith, and faith changes everything. It doesn't always make things easier, but it makes them meaningful. The verse that once shook his heart had become the foundation of his future. And in that transformation, his life gained a beauty no argument could ever destroy. Months had passed since his life took a turn no one, not even he, expected. From debating Muslims with intensity and pride to sitting in the masjid with humility and love, his transformation was something only faith could explain. But what truly amazed him was how that one verse didn't just change his heart, it changed his entire outlook on life. He started seeing people differently. Where once he looked at Muslims as opponents, now he saw them as brothers and sisters. He found himself surrounded by a new kind of family, people who embraced him not for who he had been, but for who he was becoming. They welcomed him with open arms, prayed with him, supported him, and reminded him that Islam isn't about where you start, it's about where you're going. The verse that touched him had taught him one thing above all: truth doesn't need to shout, it simply needs to reach the heart. He realized that for all the years he had debated, his heart had been locked. He had been searching for victory in arguments, but what he really needed was peace. And now he had it. He began helping others like him, those who were curious, doubtful, or even hostile toward Islam. But instead of debating, he listened. Instead of arguing, he shared his story. He spoke not as someone who was forced to change, but as someone who was freed by it. His words carried weight because they came from experience. And his sincerity touched hearts, the way that one verse had touched his. He often returned to the same place where it all began, the verse that first made him pause, made him feel, made him think. He didn't idolize the verse, he respected what it led him to: a connection with his Creator, a life filled with meaning, and a heart no longer at war with itself. Looking back, he understood that every debate, every question, every late-night search had led him here. It was never random, it was always written. And now, his story wasn't just his own. It was a reminder that sometimes one verse is all it takes to change a heart forever. Sometimes the loudest truths are heard in silence, when the heart finally listens. His story isn't just about changing beliefs, it's about breaking down walls built by pride, ego, and misunderstanding. It's about a man who challenged Islam for years, only to discover that what he was fighting wasn't false, it was the very truth he was searching for. And maybe, just maybe, that's the story of many people today, searching, questioning, debating, when in reality, their soul is waiting to hear just one verse that speaks directly to them, a verse that doesn't argue, but heals, that doesn't challenge, but invites, that doesn't scare, but gives peace. If his heart can change after years of resistance, anyone's can. Because guidance doesn't need a perfect past. It just needs an open heart. Thank you so much for watching this emotional and eye-opening journey. If it touched you in any way, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know, one story, one video, or even one verse might change someone's life forever. May peace and understanding reach every heart. Until next time, stay sincere, stay kind, and keep seeking truth.